Hey everyone! Today we're diving into an interesting part of ancient history, the Akkadian Empire. It was the very first multinational empire in the world, founded by none other than Sargon the Great around 2334 BCE. This guy didn't just unite a few cities, he brought together all of Mesopotamia under one rule, setting the bar for what it meant to be an emperor for future kings to either follow or try to outdo. Now, here's the thing. No one really knows exactly where the city of Akkad was. Imagine that. One of the most powerful cities of its time, and its location is still a mystery. Historians think it was somewhere along the Euphrates River, maybe between Sippar and Kish, or possibly somewhere else entirely. According to legends, Sargon either built or restored Akkad, and used it as the seat of his vast empire. Sargon's empire was no small thing. It stretched from the Persian Gulf across what we now know as Iraq, Syria, Jordan, and maybe even as far as Cyprus. While historians still debate the exact size, there's no doubt he created the first real empire that spanned multiple regions and cultures. Before Sargon, there was actually another king, Lugal-Zagassi of Uruk, who had already united some of the cities in the area, but Sargon took that idea and supersized it. He didn't just want to rule Mesopotamia, he wanted to conquer the known world. With this empire, Sargon paved the way for some amazing developments. His empire stabilized the region, which led to advancements in things like art, literature, science, and even farming. One of the coolest things about the Akkadian Empire, they created the first postal system. Imagine that, clay tablets wrapped in clay envelopes with the name and seal of the sender, and you couldn't open them without breaking the seal. To make sure he kept control over such a vast area, Sargon placed his most trusted men in charge of different cities. He also made a clever move by putting his daughter, Indiana, as the high priestess of Inanna in Ur. She wasn't just any priestess, she's actually the world's first known writer. Her hymns to the goddess Inanna are still admired today, and after Sargon's impressive 56-year reign, his son Rimush took over around 2279 BCE. Now, Rimush had quite the challenge right off the bat. After Sargon's death, many of the cities that had been under Akkadian rule rebelled. So, Rimush had to spend the early part of his reign putting out these fires and restoring order. He led campaigns against Elam, defeated them, and according to his inscriptions, brought back great wealth to Akkad. However, his reign was pretty short, just 9 years, and there's some speculation that his brother, Manishtusu, may have had a hand in his early death. Manishtusu took over after Rimush and, just like his brother, had to deal with revolts across the empire. But once he settled things down, he focused on expanding trade. In fact, he initiated trade with places like Magan and Mela, which we now know as modern-day Oman, the UAE, and the Indus Valley. He didn't just focus on trade though. Manishtusu was also responsible for some impressive construction projects. One of the big ones was the Ishtar Temple at Nineveh, which was considered a masterpiece at the time. He also did some major land reforms, trying to improve the empire his father and brother had built. You can still see the obelisk detailing his land distribution at the Louvre in Paris. His death, though, is a bit of a mystery. Some scholars think he was killed by his own courtiers, but no one knows exactly why. After Manishtusu, his son Naram-Sin came to power around 2261 BCE, and this guy is often considered the greatest Akkadian ruler. Just like his predecessors, he had to deal with rebellions, but once he got the empire back under control, it really flourished. Naram-Sin ruled for 36 years and expanded the empire even further. He personally led campaigns beyond the Persian Gulf and possibly even reached Egypt. One of the most famous artifacts from his reign is the victory stele, which shows him defeating Satuni, the king of the Lulubi tribe. The image is pretty intense. It depicts Naram-Sin climbing a mountain, literally walking over the bodies of his enemies, almost like he's a god himself. In fact, Naram-Sin went a step further than his grandfather Sargon. He not only called himself king of the four quarters of the universe, but he also started writing his name with a divine symbol, putting himself on the same level as the gods. Even though his reign is considered the height of the Akkadian Empire, later generations didn't look back on him as fondly. There's this story called the Curse of Agade, where the great god Enlil withdraws his blessing from Akkad. Naram-Sin, desperate to know what he did wrong, prays, looks for signs, and spends 7 years in a deep depression waiting for an answer. Finally, frustrated by the god's silence, he decides to take matters into his own hands. He marches his army to Enlil's temple in Nippur and destroys it, hoping to force a response from the gods. Of course, this backfires spectacularly. The gods send the Gutians, a brutal, almost animal-like people, to invade Akkad. They bring famine and destruction, and the once great city is left in ruins. According to the story, this was the tragic end of Akkad, all because of Naram-Sin's arrogance. But here's the catch: there's no historical record of Naram-Sin ever actually destroying the temple at Nippur. The Curse of Agade was probably written much later to show the consequences of a king defying the gods. Historically, Naram-Sin honored the gods and was even depicted beside them in temples. After the great reign of Naram-Sin, the Akkadian Empire began to struggle. His son, Shar-Kali-Sheri, took the throne, but unlike his predecessors, he couldn't keep things under control. Just like those before him, he had to deal with constant revolts after his father's death. But this time, it felt different. Shar-Kali-Sheri couldn't maintain the same level of order, and the empire started to unravel. Leak notes that even though Shar-Kali-Sheri had some successful military campaigns, he couldn't stop the empire from falling apart. The rebellions kept coming, and attacks from outside forces, like the Elamites, Amorites, and the Gutians, just kept piling on. It got so bad that after Shar-Kali-Sheri's death, we don't see many written records. The empire had fallen into chaos. Ironically, one of Shar-Kali-Sheri's most significant accomplishments was rebuilding the temple of Enlil in Nippur. Remember how Naram-Sin supposedly destroyed it in the Curse of Agade? It's kind of interesting to think that the real history may have inspired that legend. Around the same time Shar-Kali-Sheri was trying to rebuild the empire, the Gutians were invading, and there was widespread famine. These events probably helped fuel the story that eventually became the Curse of Agade, blaming the empire's downfall on angering the gods. While the Gutians are often blamed for the collapse of Akkad, more recent studies suggest that climate change might have played a major role. A massive drought could have caused famines, disrupted trade, and weakened the empire to the point where it couldn't bounce back from invasions and internal strife like it had before. After Shar-Kali-Sheri, there were a couple of kings, Dudu and his son Shuturu, but they barely ruled anything beyond the city of Akkad itself. By this point, the mighty empire was just a shadow of what it once was. And like its rise, the fall of Akkad remains somewhat of a mystery. What we do know is that this once great empire, the first of its kind in history, eventually faded away, leaving behind nothing but memories and legends of its incredible kings and their accomplishments.